This card cost me $5 raw, and in a PSA 10 slab, it's worth up to $750. That's roughly 140x in returns for doing nothing but sending this card to a warehouse in California and paying $25. Somehow, this is the industry that everyone loves to call a scam. Of course, I'm talking about grading cards in general, but specifically for this video, we're going to be addressing the claims that you see everywhere online that PSA cards, PSA grading, is a scam. And I'm going to be defending them. And it's not because they're perfect, they're not. And it's not even because I particularly love them. I'm not a PSA apologist. I have only ever graded with PSA because if you want to sell graded cards, the best way to do it is to grade your cards with the company that everyone wants. So if you look in my collections or on my shelf, I mean, I do have a couple PSA slabs that I graded myself probably 10 years ago up there, but in general, I don't really care that much about slabs, at least not for my personal collection. It just doesn't really appeal to me that much. I would much rather have the card. What I do like about the PSA slabs is that it protects the card. I do like that. As a longtime collector and grader, I've been doing it for the past 12 years as an adult, I have graded over 1,000 cards, which nowadays isn't much. There are people who are grading 1,000 cards in a single submission. That's not me. I'm just a hobbyist. I'm just a collector. I sell them. That's what I care about. So that's part of the reason why I think I'm such a good person to speak on this issue is I've been grading with PSA since 2016. The first submission I ever sent in, one of the cards was a first edition base set Charizard that I sent in with one of my 6 free vouchers that PSA used to give you. And that was at the beginning of 2016. And I've been grading with PSA ever since. And the only reason is because if you look on eBay, 99% of the graded listings are PSA. I don't really care about grading cards for myself. If I grade a card, usually it's because I want to resell it, not because I'm keeping it for my PC. If I like the card and I don't think it'll grade a 10, I'll just keep it in a binder or stick it on my shelf raw. So when all I see online is that everybody is attacking PSA because it's a scam, certainly there are some shady things that PSA has done, and I'm not defending everything that PSA has ever done, nor am I defending it. Wait, what? But everything that you've heard online about why they're random, their grades are random, is just dead wrong. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why, and you'll also understand why Tag's objective AI grading is actually the worst option. And bonus, I'll also explain why PSA upcharging you for more valuable cards actually is the most reasonable part of the process. But the myth online is that PSA graders are just a bunch of drunk guys throwing darts at a dartboard and picking a grade randomly. And Tag shows up with lasers and AI and 47 inspection points and says, "We're the fair ones." And honestly, I used to half believe this too, but when you look at the actual volume that PSA processes, like I mentioned, and what a grade is actually measuring, you realize PSA isn't really being random. They are being subjective. They're making a specific, defensible, subjective call on purpose. So they don't claim that it's 100% objective. It is subjective because the beauty of a card and how it presents visually is subjective. So let's get into it. So like I mentioned, as of March 2026, PSA is averaging just over 67,000 cards graded every single day. And that puts them on pace for 26.2 million cards this year. And of course, Pokemon alone is roughly 2/3 of that. Tag, the company built entirely on the promise of pure AI objectivity, did 44,000 cards in all of February, the entire month. PSA does that number in like 16 hours. When you're grading 2 million cards a month, you're going to get outliers. There will be some inconsistency at the margins. Of course, it's just bound to happen. I've had PSA make mistakes before, and PSA that I can prove and that I really know happened has made one mistake. And do you want to know what it was? This is probably close to 5 to 10 years ago. I graded a first edition Jungle Executor, and it came back fine. The grade seemed appropriate, even though I obviously hoped it would be a 9 or a 10. I think it came back an 8. The only issue was it said execute on it. And I could have gotten it fixed. I just chose not to because the card was worth like $20. And that's the only mistake that PSA has ever made with me. Now, that's not to say PSA hasn't made mistakes before. Of course they have, and they will continue to do so. Expensive mistakes, like this PSA 10 lenticular deoxys that was destroyed and regraded as a 6. That does happen, and that's really bad, and they didn't handle it well. They should have handled it better. We can say that, but two things can be true at once. They cannot handle that well, and still 99.9% of the time handle things perfectly. Okay, but scale alone isn't a defense. You can't just be like, well, we grade a lot of cards, so who cares if we mess up half of them? Well, let's look at what the grades actually are saying. So for modern Pokemon gem rates, PSA hits Gem Mint 10 on 60.8% of submissions. CGC, totally separate company, separate grader, separate warehouse, comes in at 63.5. So a 3% gap, but on hundreds of thousands of cards, that's not much. And sports cards, which deal with older stock and nastier condition issues, PSA sits at 41.2% gem rate, BGS 45.1%, and SGC 37.9%, being the most strict. Again, there's a spread there, but relatively a tight one, and held consistently across two entirely different product categories month over month. If PSA were just guessing, you wouldn't see this kind of convergence with a competitor at this scale. So real quick, this is what I do, guys. If you enjoy this kind of deep dive on topics, I talk about collecting, investing, all this kind of stuff, grading. I've been doing it longer than 99% of the other YouTubers out there. Then go ahead, hit the subscribe button. It really does help. And also just a quick shout out to the sponsor for today's video, which is of course the Collector app. Collector has been an amazing partner for my channel, and it is just the #1 app you absolutely need to have if you're collecting TCGs. You can input all of the stock that you have, whether it's sealed, booster boxes, raw cards, PSA slabs, whatever, CGC slabs, if you have those. You can input it all into your portfolio and just track the value over time. You can see which cards are market movers that day, that week, which ones are doing the worst, which ones have lost the most value. There's so many options. I'll leave a link in the description to download the Collector app. It's on iOS, Android, all that good stuff. You know the deal. You can also check it out on your PC. That's what I do half the time anyways. All right, back to the video. All right, so this is why Tag's objectivity is actually a trap. This is essentially Tag's pitch. Humans are biased and machines aren't. So AI grading is more trustworthy, right? Sounds like an airtight argument, except Tag's own user base is beginning to question it. And if you're on the Tag subreddit, then you've seen this constantly. Tag makes just as many mistakes, and most likely more as a percentage of cards graded than someone like PSA or BGS, because they're brand new. So this is my main point about why the objective AI approach isn't really all it's cracked up to be. I think AI and automation could be a great tool for PSA to use, which honestly, I'm sure they're already doing it. Of course they are. Every other company is. But it can't be the only approach or even the main approach. And here's why. A camera can measure a scratch. It cannot measure whether a human being holding that card at arm's length under normal lighting conditions can see that scratch. And that's the entire crux of this video. PSA's grading is somewhat subjective because card beauty and condition is somewhat subjective, even though we don't like that. Of course, we can measure the amount of damage on a card objectively and assign a grade to the number of damages on a card, but that doesn't always signify the actual overall condition and beauty of the card. Sometimes a card looks perfect and it grades a 6 because there's a serious warp or dent or scratch that you didn't see. Sometimes it might have surface wear on the back, which is less important because who really cares about what the back looks like compared to the front? And there are cards that Ludwig has graded in this video that shows Tag was actually harsher even though you really couldn't see the damage anyways. And unless you turn the AI meter all the way up to see the surface damage on the back of a card, you really can't see it at all. And PSA takes that into account. Now, that's still going to count as a ding against the card. It may not get a 10, but if you really can't see it with the naked eye at all, it doesn't actually detract from the condition or the beauty of the card to the naked eye, Well, maybe we shouldn't assign it so much value then. So I kind of already mentioned this just previously, but let's define what PSA is actually doing when a grade looks too generous. So like I said, say a card has surface wear on the back and in a spot that's completely invisible under normal lighting to a normal human being. However, Tag's camera under a raking light at a weird angle can detect it and flags it, so it drops the grade to a 6. So does it deserve a flawless from the pack 10? No, probably not. And usually PSA won't give it one, but it could come back a 9. That's not PSA getting fooled. That's them actually just looking at the card and looking at its overall visual presentation. And that is the correct way to do subjective grading. Real damage exists, it's really there, it really dings the card as far as what grade it could receive, but it doesn't affect how the card presents, so it's not going to get a perfect grade, but it also doesn't get punished for something that's invisible to the naked eye. Being harsher doesn't always make a company better or make the grader better. It just makes 10s rarer, which is going to artificially drive up prices, automatically pumping their value. But it also makes their service not worth using, because if a 10 is so impossible to get or so rare, nobody's gonna grade with that company. You have to ensure that getting a 10 is actually feasible. If it's not feasible, nobody's gonna grade with your company, because certainly we know cards can grade a 10, even if they're not technically perfect in every way. And that's why Tag does 44,000 cards a month and PSA does over 2 million. So let's talk about the main part of PSA that people are angry about online. It is the declared value upcharge. You submit a card and you have to tell PSA what you think it's worth, and if you lowball it, PSA doesn't cover it for its real value if something goes wrong. They cover it for the declared value. That's it. With my Lugia EX, for example, I know it's worth $600 to $750 if it comes back a 10. But if it comes back a 9, it's worth a fraction of that, maybe $100, $200. But I don't know the grade until it's graded. Nobody does. So how am I supposed to declare an accurate value? Here's the part that nobody is explaining. PSA has to ensure every single card that's sitting in their warehousing and processing pipeline, even before it's been graded. And at 67,000 cards a day, they physically cannot pop open every submission and appraise it individually before ensuring the batch. The declared value you submit is their insurance data, and it's based on you, the owner of the card. So you get the choice for how much you want to insure it for. So if you undervalue your card to save a few bucks, you're also the one who eats the loss if that card gets damaged or lost in a warehouse holding tens of thousands of cards at any given time. So is the tiered pricing structure annoying? Yeah, absolutely. And it feels a bit shady, and honestly, there is a guaranteed better way to do it. I'm not saying I have all the answers, I'm just saying I guarantee you could come up with something where your customers are happier about it and it makes more sense, it's more straightforward. But let's be honest, PSA wants accurate values so they can actually insure your card is not a catchy story compared to PSA is a scam. And that's why nobody frames it that way. So this brings us all the way back around to the beginning. Name one other industry where you pay as little as $25 for a service and walk away with a 100x return or more. You can't do that on a stock, on a startup. You can't really do that in any other industry where the same card, the same object, the same thing that you own, say it's a house, you send it into some service and you 140x the value. There's no other industry that you can do that. And this is my argument that PSA is still providing a massively valuable service, which is why you see people screeching online while the average grader and collector and seller is just gonna continue grading with PSA, because 9 times out of 10 or more, they get your card back, they grade it appropriately, and everything's fine. But they do mess up every once in a while, and they don't always take care of it the right way. So get better, PSA. This is my point. The entire economy only exists around PSA because collectors trust PSA's grade, quirks and all. It reflects something real about a card's actual condition and rarity while also subjectively appraising the overall visual presentation of the card, which is something that Tag doesn't take into account. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you agree, disagree. Like I said before, I'm not really a PSA apologist. I've only really ever graded with PSA because that's what people want, because people trust them. They've been around the longest, and while they do mess up from time to time, and sometimes in a big way, lenticular deoxys, Most of the times they get it right. And even though the process can be a bit confusing and they could do some work on that, make it a little bit more straightforward, overall, it's worth it because I can 140x my Lugia EX. That's about it, guys. So if you appreciate what I'm doing, like the video, comment, subscribe. It all really does help. And for those of you who want to help a little bit more, or you have some questions that you want to ask me, you can ask me directly over at my Patreon. I've got one whole patron member. And you could be number 2. And he's already been asking me questions regularly. So it's great. I'll answer all your questions. We can talk, go back and forth, debate, whatever you want to do. That's about it. Peace.